Coming to paperback and e-readers in 2021, John Haynes, Taking Care of Business. The man who rules the world breaks on a brand new partner to help him take care of business in this action-packed, all-new John Haynes series adventure. Get John Haynes, Taking Care of Business in 2021 at online booksellers everywhere. Recently, some politicians like Andrew Yang have been proposing a universal basic income for all Americans. And according to Andrew Yang's theory, if we give Americans a universal basic income to meet their basic needs so that they can pay their rent, be able to pay for utilities, and be able to pay for basic toiletries and food, they can go out here and start making efforts to get themselves out of poverty. Now, as someone who has grown up on government programs like welfare, Section 8, and food stamps, I see great fundamental flaws in Andrew Yang and the supporters of universal basic incomes theory. And when I take a critical examination of universal basic income, it really reminds me of the welfare state that I grew up in. And when I look at the proposal for universal basic income, it looks like plans to take the country back to the welfare state that practically turned inner city neighborhoods like the one I grew up in, the South Bronx, into the ghettos they became. Now, the reason why many of those inner city neighborhoods that I grew up in, like in the South Bronx, became ghettos was primarily because they had been transformed by the welfare state of the 1960s and the 1970s and even the 80s and early 90s. And as a result, these neighborhoods, which primarily had black-owned businesses at the time, wound up changing because more and more people, a lot of the mothers especially, wound up going out here and getting on welfare. And as a result of them getting on welfare, the men were pushed out of the community, the fathers were pushed out of the community because the women wanted a more secure stream of income. So the black men were pushed out of the community because their income was unstable due to racism and white supremacy, and the fact that their jobs were always put on the line because of the color of their skin. So the black women pushed the men out of the community in order to get that steady stream of income from the welfare state, and that also led to them pushing out many of the black businesses in those neighborhoods, and that's one of the things that led to the decline of the community. Now, if we take the universal basic income theory and we apply it as related to the welfare state, we can see a similar pattern actually emerge as related to the decline of the country. Because with universal basic income, you are supposedly guaranteeing that every American receive the same kind of income to pay for their basic rent, their basic utilities, their basic toiletries, their basic groceries. And when you do that, what happens is, while you're providing some alleged economic security, you are creating a decline as related to standards, because when people are given a basic income, they start to lose their motivation for going out here and doing better. Because oftentimes when you have individuals who are in a poverty situation and the incentive for them doing better is their lack of money, that's what drives them to go out here and want to do better. So oftentimes what helps lift a person out of poverty is the pain of poverty, and that is the thing that motivates people to do things like want to go to school to get a more advanced degree, or go to trade school to learn a skilled trade, or go out here and develop other skills in other areas. People's motivation oftentimes is tied to their economic situation, And when you take that motivation out, people don't want to push as hard, because what happens when you give people a universal basic income is they lose their motivation to want to improve their quality of life, and they lose their motivation to want to go out here and improve their station in life. And this is something I saw firsthand growing up in the South Bronx. A lot of people in the South Bronx, a lot of times, they lost their motivation to want to do better because they always knew that there would be a welfare check, food stamps, and Section 8. So they didn't have much motivation to go out here and want to improve their quality of life or their children's quality of life, because they always knew that there would be a welfare state to take care of them. And I look at the universal basic income as a scaling up of the welfare state, and this would lead to people becoming dependent on your universal basic income, and that dependency would practically smash any motivation those people had to do better. And that would do harm to the country, because what would happen is, instead of people going out here and taking risks to create new and innovative products and ideas, what happens is most people who become dependent on universal basic income wind up staying home and sitting in front of the television, like many of the single mothers did during the 70s and the 80s. Many of them just wound up sitting there watching soap operas and other talk shows later on, and nobody made any effort to do better because they still knew they could depend on that universal welfare money, and they knew that they could just sit there and just depend on that money coming in on the 1st and the 15th. And this would only get worse, because if people knew that they could their rent was guaranteed, their food and utilities were guaranteed, they would have no incentive to do better, and they would have no incentive to try at anything. Moreover, if we go out here and we create this system and businesses are tied to it, businesses also would become complacent, and many businesses, instead of going out here to produce products based on supply and demand, would just basically make their products just to please that group with universal basic income, and they would only want to make those products because they know they've got a guaranteed audience, and they would also have no incentive to do better or no incentive to improve the quality of their products, because they know they are assured a certain amount of sales based on universal basic income. And even worse with universal basic income is we would see a complete devaluation of the dollar, because what makes the dollar valuable is the fact that you have people working for the dollar, and when you have people working for the dollar, then they have incentive to go out here and work for more dollars. But when people are guaranteed a dollar, they don't really have that incentive to go out here to work to make more dollars, and they have no real incentive to go out here and try harder. So what happens is, when you have a universal basic income situation, everybody has a dollar, but the dollars have next to no value because everybody's guaranteed a dollar. So what happens in a universal basic income situation is, yes, everybody's getting income, but the dollars don't have a value. The products that you try to buy with those dollars, the price of them eventually winds up getting higher, because with universal basic income and these products being produced in a way where there's no demand and supply, that the products usually you're making just enough for the group with the universal basic income, and you start to get things like shortages, similar to what we saw with your communist countries, where we'd have these shortages and we would have these supply issues. And when I look at the whole concept of universal basic income, it's a concept that, again, is destined to fail. And the reason why it's destined to fail is because if everybody has money, then nobody has anything that has value. And then nobody has an incentive to go out here and build better, do better, or improve anything because they're guaranteed the basic. And for most people, they're willing to just sit there and have the basic because for them, the basic is enough and they don't really care about improving themselves. And there's no way a person will want to lift themselves out of poverty without any sort of motivation to do better. Now, again, as a guy who grew up on welfare, Section 8, and food stamps, having to live in poverty, that was one of the things that drove me to do better. It was one of the things that drove me to want to do well in school. It was one of the things that drove me to do well in college. And it was one of those things that drove me to keep looking for a job and wanting, because I always wanted to do better than what I was living, because I lived next to the railroad, Metro North Railroad tracks on Park Avenue in the Bronx. And I always wanted to do better. And I always wanted to have my own. I always wanted to go out here and work to do better. That's why I worked so hard, working on over 75 plus books. I always wanted to go out here and have a good life and good income. I mean, I don't have it yet, but I'm just keep pushing because I understand that if you want something in this world, you have to work for it. And if you want to achieve something, you have to go out here and get it for yourself. And in many parts of my life, I mean, I remember one time I was living on $60 a month a family member was giving me, and that was one of the most painful parts of my life. And I wanted to do better, and I just kept fighting to do better. And I remember one month I had $60 and I had to take 30 of it to pay for a civil service test. And that was a hard sacrifice that I had to make because I only made that sacrifice because I wanted to do better, I wanted to improve, and I wanted to get out of poverty. I'm not there yet, but the whole thing is, if I had an opportunity to work, I would take it in a heartbeat. And again, I had no support from universal basic income. And the whole thing is, I understand that if you don't have that pain, you're not going to be motivated to do better. And if you sit there and somebody gives you something, you're not going to value it because you're getting something for nothing. And that's what universal basic income robs people of, is it robs them of that whole motivation to go out here and try harder, try to do better, and try to push to get towards better. And when you have, again, I know for a fact from living in the South Bronx and seeing people just lose their motivation because a welfare caseworker would sabotage them as related to them trying to go out here and try to get a job, telling them that they would close their case, or a Section 8 person telling them, oh, we're going to charge you 3 months worth of rent, even though you just started the job a month ago. I know that these government programs choke the life out of people, and universal basic income would choke the life out of this country and turn it into one big ghetto. And it would be a ghetto filled with apathetic people like the ones I lived around. And they would spend most of their time not building their community. And what they would do is go out here and it would just be endless people across the country getting into beefs, getting into arguments, getting into back and forth. Because when people are given everything, they have no aspirations to do anything. And when you have people given a universal basic income, they have no motivation to go out here to do better. They have no motivation to get out off of poverty. And what you're going to have is a group of dependent people. And that dependent class, when they're out here and all they're doing is depending on that money that comes on the 1st and the 15th, all they're going to do is waste money and waste time, and they're not going to do anything productive with their lives because they feel like they're getting their needs met and they're getting what they want, so they have no incentive again to do better. And when you give people something, they don't see a value in it. And that's what universal basic income does, is it devalues the money, it devalues everything, and it makes it where people have no motivation to go out here and work to do better, work to strive to do better, work to improve the quality of their lives. And while people like your Andrew Yang think, oh, this is going to get people out of poverty, no, it's going to create a new poverty class and a new permanent underclass, because from what I've seen from people growing up on welfare is that when you give people things, give them the money, they have no motivation to do anything else, and they have no motivation to do anything else other than sit here and watch talk shows, or sit here and get into beefs and petty arguments with other people, or you get a whole host of a new, as I call it, a new breed of bums, similar to what we have in other countries where they're career students, and nobody ever makes that effort to take themselves to the next level, because they always know that even if they fall, they will always have that safety net, and as long as the safety net is there, they have no reason to start climbing up the net and stand up on their own 2 feet. So when I look at universal basic income, I see it as the recreation of the welfare state, a scaling up of the welfare state, and a scaling up of codependency, and creating a dependent underclass that would undermine these United States of America. If you'd like to see me make more videos like this, you can donate to my Patreon, my PayPal, or my Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. And if you want to help me, you can also pick up some of my positive black fiction on the SJS Direct imprint on Amazon.com in paperback Kindle format, Smashwords, the iBook Store, and Google Play. That's all I have to say for this video. You comment, rate, and subscribe.
Now available in paperback and e-readers, E-Steam Blast from the Past. Hell's aspiring angel takes on her demonic doppelganger in this action-packed, time-traveling E-Steam series adventure. Get E-Steam Blast from the Past with a bonus E-Steam comic book, No Good Deed, in paperback and e-readers at online booksellers everywhere.